Hi, I'm Jerry Kenney, and thanks for joining us for this edition of America's Survival TV on Roku. Our guest tonight is the anti-communist Brazilian writer and philosopher OLAVO de Carvalho. The new book, The USA and the New World Order, features a debate in which OLAVO debates one of Russian President Vladimir Putin's key advisors, Alexander Dugin. OLAVO is the president of the Inter-American Institute for Philosophy, Government, and Social Thought, and is one of the scheduled speakers at the March 21st Conclave for Democracy to be held at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. The goal of this event is to organize opposition leaders and political activists from Latin America on behalf of political and economic freedom in the Western Hemisphere. OLAVO now lives in the United States, but has written extensively about how his home country of Brazil went Marxist. He said that it was through the destruction of high culture, the reduction of universities to centers of communist propaganda, and the country's descent to levels of moral degradation which would have seemed unthinkable before. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? Well, can America be saved? Can the world be saved? Those are the topics tonight on America's Survival TV. And with that, we'll go to Cliff Kincaid in the Washington, D.C. area.
Jerry, thanks a million. We do have a great treat tonight. We're going to be talking with OLAVO de Carvalho, the Brazilian philosopher and writer, who can explain not only what's happened to Brazil, which is being led at the current time by Dilma Rousseff, the former communist guerrilla, but can explain the same processes that were at work in Brazil as they affect the United States, not only America under Obama, but so many different countries throughout Latin America. And he's somebody who has a long experience in living under not only Marxism, but debating the proponents of the anti-American left, including, most recently, Professor Alexander Dugin, who is an advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, Jerry, in his introduction, mentioned this book. It's not actually out yet, but this is a pre-publication copy of OLAVO debating Alexander Dugin on the subject of the New World Order and the USA. Now, the book is not out yet. This is a pre-publication copy, but we'll tell you how you can get information about this very, very interesting debate. We have to understand the competing forces in the world globally. And as a matter of fact, just today we have posted a new column I've written about the role being played by the Roman Catholic Church in world affairs. Now, getting back to Alexander Dugin for a second, faithful viewers of America's Survival TV know that we published last year this book, Back from the Dead, The Return of the Evil Empire. Now, if you look closely at that book, you look right under Putin on his left side there, that is the face of Alexander Dugin. And there is a section in that book on the influence of Dugin. This is somebody who has combined various forces, various elements of totalitarian thought, including certain occult elements from Russia, into this new vision, or we might call it a nightmare for the world that Putin is pursuing. But of course, he's not doing this alone. Putin has a lot of elements and alliances behind him, not to mention one that's been in the news over the last week or so, the regime in Iran. But also, don't forget the international communist or Marxist left, which has been taking power country after country after country in Latin America. We're going to be talking about all of this and how we in the United States can hopefully survive such a fate here. But we're going to get into it in order to understand what has happened to so much of the world. And we are on the road to some kind of, you could call it a world government, some kind of global community. That may be another euphemism. Who is going to dominate this unfolding, developing state of world affairs? We see these various competing units of power, Putin's Russia, the Roman Catholic Church, the international communist left, global Islam. What role will the United States play? Can we, in fact, survive the last 2 years of President Obama? These are all the questions on the agenda tonight as we welcome Olavo de Carvalho, again, president of the Inter-American Institute, veteran anti-communist Brazilian writer and philosopher. Olavo, thanks for coming on the show with us tonight.
Thank you for this kind invitation. It's a great pleasure to be with you again.
Olavo, I've known you for many years. You've always been a fighter for Western values, for Christian values. It must be so troubling to look at the success that our enemies have had around the world and to see the Roman Catholic Church. I know you're a Catholic. I'm a Catholic. We're very disturbed about the path that Pope Francis has been taking recently, and we can get into that. But explain, if you would, please, what has happened first to your country of Brazil, how you were one of the sort of a voice in the wilderness down there, trying to be the resistance, speaking for the resistance to the Marxist wave, the revolutionaries who have taken power down there. How did it happen to a country like Brazil?
All the things have started with an organization called the São Paulo Forum. They gave this neutral name on purpose. As Lula say, in order people didn't know what we are talking about inside. They started in 1990. It was an idea from Fidel Castro, Lula, and Lula's friend Frei Beto. They had a meeting in Havana, and they started this organization in 1990, and soon it had more than 100 organization members. This organization included legal political parties and criminal organizations, drug dealers, kidnappers, like the Chilean MIR, Movimiento de la Izquierda Revolucionaria, and the FARC, the Colombian Revolutionary Armed Forces, who has the monopoly of the drug dealing in Latin America nowadays. With a little help from Mr. Clinton, who helped the Colombian government to fight the drug dealers with the condition of not touching the political organizations. So the cartels were destroyed and the FARC got everything in their hands. In the United States, the tradition of the studies in international affairs and political science is that the subject, the agent of everything are the states. And this is not correct about communist movement, because communist movement existed 60 years before the Soviet Union and survived the Soviet Union. So communism has to be studied with a large world movement, not as only the arm of a government. And in the United States, for decades, even the best students of the matter commit this mistake, understanding communism only with an instrument of the Soviet Union. It is in part an instrument of the Soviet Union, but it has an autonomy. In the year 2000, the French philosopher Jean-François Revel wrote a book, La Grande Parade. I don't know how to translate this in English. How would you say it? La Grande Parade. The Great Parade, where he asked how it's possible that 10 years after the destruction of the Soviet Union, the communist movement is so strong when it should be completely destroyed too. Well, this is the answer. The communist movement does not depend from the Soviet Union. It is an autonomous movement. It includes the Soviet Union, and not is included in it. And it has many ways of action that escape the usual approach of the political scientists and international relations students. Some subtle ways of influencing the culture bit by bit. They learn, in the 20s, the Hungarian philosopher George Lukács proposed some changes in the communist strategy, and he was repelled by the Soviet Union. They said, we don't want this here, but they sent him to Germany, where he founded the so-called Frankfurt School. And the speciality of the Frankfurt School is cultural penetration, cultural destruction, very subtle and long-term destruction, destructing all the values, all the beliefs, all the trust, the confidence of people one another, and spread suspicion everywhere, and speak against everything. Yeah? And this was eroding the national American culture and national American pride and so on. It was a very slow process, and most people could not evaluate the strength of the things. This is strength by a cumulative effect along the decades. All this was not autonomous. The Soviet Union was directed the whole process. Very subtle, because the Comintern financed the Frankfurt School. When they created, these people from Frankfurt School created the idea of sex lib and gay rights and so on, Stalin rejected all. Say, I don't want this in the Soviet Union, but I want this in the Western world, because this is destructive. We don't want destruction here, but we want destruction there. And they spread these people all around the world. It's a group of very strong intellectuals, not great philosophers, but people very able to perform the tasks, like Jürgen Habermas and Herbert Marcuse and Walter Benjamin. All of them influenced deeply American movies, especially American movies, since the 30s, with the school of movie writers that was run by John Howard Lawson. Yes. And he taught people, we will not make communist movies. We will make normal movies that the American public can accept, but with small and discreet communist messages here and there, in every movie. So it's very difficult to find some American movie since the 30s and 40s up to now that you don't find any anti-American message.
Olavo, let me recap if I can. So what we're witnessing here in Brazil, Venezuela, the United States, and many other countries throughout the hemisphere and worldwide is the result of a Marxist or communist penetration of our society, our culture, changing the very nature of our culture in order to undermine us, to rot us, corrupt us from within. But in 1990, I understand you to be saying this is when the West, the United States, was saying, well, we won the Cold War. The Soviet Union collapsed. But yet that's the very date, as you put it, when the Sao Paulo Forum, this collection, this coalition of anti-American communist groups, even terrorist organizations, began this intensive preparation for what is transpiring. You mentioned Lula, the predecessor, the president of Brazil, before Rousseff, working on this with Castro. They have been so successful to this point. When we look at Latin America, just Latin America, how many countries would you say we have in Latin America today that are not Marxist?
Only Chile and Paraguay.
Chile and Paraguay. I mean,
all the others are either governed by communist parties or under the strong influence of communists.
And now, let me get your thoughts.
Also in Colombia, but in Colombia, the communists are very strong.
Yeah.
Not in electoral terms. They have very few votes, but they dominate the media and the judicial system. All the judges, they're bribed, all the judges.
Now, I had always looked at Colombia as a success story. Under the former president Uribe, somebody who fought the FARC, the forces, the communist terrorist narcotics group, who fought them back with U.S. help.
Yes.
And I know the much maligned NSA played a role in helping Colombia at that time find out where the FARC leaders were and go in there and kill them. We know there was a great success there, yet it seems like when we look at Colombia today, Uribe is out of office. His former associate is now the president, Santos. He's negotiating with the FARC in Havana. What's going on with Colombia?
You know, Santos was elected under the slogan, no más FARC, no more FARC. I was there. I saw the electoral campaign. I helped him in the campaign. It was wonderful to see the enthusiasm of the Colombian people against the FARC. So everybody voted for Santos. He had more than 70% of the votes. It was a great success. And the next day, he betrayed everybody.
How do you explain that? Was he secretly an agent of the other side? Was he bribed? Has he been corrupted?
I believe he was bribed because he was the minister of the defense at the time of Uribe. And he did a great job against the FARC. But he changed his mind in 24 hours. I can only explain it by bribery or any other secret manipulation. But I don't believe he was always a traitor, always an agent. No, this is impossible. Because it was he the direct responsible for the military destruction of the FARC.
Now, let me ask you about one other country which was in the news a couple years ago when Venezuela under Chavez was trying to take control, and that is Honduras. What's the situation there?
I don't know what is happening now, but it's not bad. It looks to be normal, stable. They have a stable democracy with a leftist president, but as a moderate guy, he will not persecute his adversaries and so on. So politically it's normal. Huh?
Now the Sandinistas are back in power in Nicaragua. The leftists have taken the presidency in El Salvador. I mean, all of this has been happening while the United States and the West gloated in the collapse of communism. Was this part of the deception to get us thinking that we had won? And meanwhile, they made all this progress from their perspective right under our noses in the Western Hemisphere?
Yes, in part it was a deception, but in part it's also a mistake from American politicians and opinion makers, because when they defeated the Soviet Union, but not the communist movement, they thought those things were the same. They are not the same. This is the problem. The communist movement created the Soviet Union and survived it. It's very strong in the whole world, and nothing was done against them. It was done against the Soviet Union, and very well done by Ronald Reagan. But this is not everything. So, as you just observed, in the very year where the Soviet Union was toppled, they were creating the Sao Paulo Forum, and the motto, the slogan was, "We will reconquer in Latin America everything that we lost in East Europe." And they did it. And in the beginning, nobody believed it, because people in Brazil, they read the American press and believe everything. So when they read the Soviet Union is over, they said there is no more communism, there's no more problem. And I try to explain that the communist movement is not the same thing as the Soviet Union, but everybody say I was crazy. When I started writing about the Sao Paulo Forum, nobody believed it. I was not the first to investigate this. It was there was a lawyer in São Paulo called José Carlos Graça Wagner, a great friend of mine. He is already dead, but he had a full room full of São Paulo Forum documents, and he wanted to write a book about it, but he had no time. He died, and he gave me part of these documents, and I started publishing. At that time, I had a column in the big Brazilian newspaper, O Globo. And every week I wrote about the Sao Paulo Forum, and everybody said, "You're crazy, this is conspiracy theory," and so on. But in 2000, I believe in 2005, Lula himself made 2 speeches in the celebration of the 15th anniversary of the Sao Paulo Forum, confessed everything. He told, We have this organization. It's not properly secret, but it's discreet, so that nobody knows what we are talking inside it, and so on. And he told everything. And soon after, there was a video of the Third National Congress of the Workers' Party, Lula's party, confessing this São Paulo Forum is the strategical coordination of the left in Latin America. Because when I started writing about this, the Workers' Party reacted, saying, "Oh, you are lying. The São Paulo Forum is just a club for debates. It has no authority at all. All this is a lie." I said, "No, the club of debates does not issue resolutions." And every General Assembly of the São Paulo Forum ended with resolutions that were signed unanimously by 200 parties. So it was the whole of leftist politics in America that was decided in the São Paulo Forum. And Lula even boasted that we put Hugo Chavez in the power, because Hugo Chavez only entered the São Paulo Forum when the organization was already 5 years old. He was a newcomer, but he was very well received, and people decided to promote him, and they put him in the presidency of Venezuela. And Lula boasted, we did it. So there was a kind of mutual interference in the politics of several countries. The government of one country interfering in another one. This was, for them, was normal. And all this was secret.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Olavo de Carvalho. He's president of the Inter-American Institute. Go to his website at theinteramerican.org, theinteramerican.org. Now, there's so much I'd like to talk to you about. This pre-publication copy of the book, The USA and the New World Order, with your debate with Putin advisor Alexander Dugin, is just fascinating in so many ways. I do want to talk about that, as well as President Obama and his relationship with this international communist movement. Of course, he regards Brazil as a friend, the government of Brazil. He just normalized relations with Castro's Cuba, using Pope Francis as a mediator. Let's get back to the old Soviet Union and Russia today and get your thoughts on that, Olavo, because as I read this debate you had with Dugin, and we'll give you the website where you can read it for yourself up on the internet. And when I read a very interesting article you have posted at your Inter-American Institute website as well, it seems like you've concluded that Dugin has combined, I think as you put it, elements of the old Soviet Union, Tsarist Russia, some esoteric philosophy, some elements of Nazi philosophy. I mean, it looks like he's throwing a heck of a lot of stuff together to keep Russia going and to make Russia into a modern-day imperialist power. Is that a correct reading?
Yeah. I believe that ideologically or philosophically, Dugin's thought makes no sense at all. But it makes very good sense in the strategical point of view, because he's a great strategist. And his strategy is to gather everybody that has something to do or to speak against the United States. And gather everybody, communists, Nazis, Muslim, fascists, traditionalists, everybody. And he is well received in all these groups. And this is his magic. We will not discuss our difference, because we have we have to first to destroy the great Satan, that is the United States. He creates many strange theories that there are some Atlantic powers and terrestrial powers, and the terrestrial powers are the good guys, and the Atlantic are the bad guys, and we have to destroy the Atlantic. Well, the Atlantic are the United States and Great Britain. The most extraordinary things is that he is very well received in very different groups. Can you imagine communists, hardline KGBs sit on the same table with the French New Right? And traditionalists, disciples of René Guénon and Julius Evola. And he is able to gather all these people and to make all them to speak like friends, because they are all against the United States. This is a work of genius, but it's not properly an ideology, and it's not a philosophy. It is a strategic conception.
And let's talk a little bit about the Muslim.
He inspired in part in Stalin, because few people know that Stalin did a great job with several nations in the Soviet Union. He stimulated nationalism in each of these nations, and national culture and so on. The more nationalist they became, the more attached to the Communist Party. And so he conciliated different interests, completely antagonistic. And Dugin is doing exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's look at a couple elements of this Dugin approach that Putin seems to be following. What is Israel a target? Clearly, the Iranian nuclear weapons program wouldn't be where it is without Russian support. Russia has provided the nuclear reactors. Russia provides diplomatic support. What is Russia's role vis-a-vis Israel, and what is the ultimate aim here? Is it to destroy Israel? And in your view, I know you're a supporter of Israel as I am. Do the Israelis, and they're coming up on an election in just about a week or so, do the Israelis realize the role being played by Russia in all of this?
I am not sure if they are aware of this thing, but you know, my main thesis in this debate was that there are three big globalist schemes in the world. There is the Western scheme, the Bilderberg, the George Soros and Rockefellers and these people, and then there is the Russian-Chinese scheme, that is a hair of the old communists, and there is the Islamic scheme, and they are competing. Sometimes they are competing, sometimes they are collaborating, and the only countries which have condition to resist this are the United States and Israel, because they have a strong national consciousness, the awareness, they have traditions, and they have reason to fight.
Yeah.
All the others are yielding before this powers. You know, the European Union is itself an instrument of globalism, and we see no resistance except in the United States, in part of the United States, let's say half of the United States, the other half is globalist, and in Israel. And so they have to destroy, absolutely to destroy the United States. In order to destroy the United States, they have to destroy Israel first. Mm-hmm. But it's not only Russia who wants this. Russia wants this, and the Muslims want this, and the Western globalists want this too. Mm-hmm. Because they cannot stand any kind of national identity. Well, Israel has a very strong national identity, and they have 5,000 years of reasons to have a national identity. They will not accept this kind of globalist authority over them, never. And the Americans will not accept it either. And so these are the main obstacles, the United States and Israel. Mm-hmm. So you have three great schemes. Well, and the Catholic Church could be and would ideally be the main center of resistance to these three schemes. But it looks to be adhering already to these things.
Yes, to this and that's Olavo, that's the subject of a column. I've written a couple articles about this. I've got one up today about how a leading Marxist writer has actually written a long piece. Let me grab his name here. Has written a long piece. I quote it in my own article as referring to the capture by, quote, progressive forces of the Vatican. And this Marxist says that, in his view, Pope Francis, who comes from Argentina, who's a Jesuit, is part of a process to take over the Vatican, to use it on behalf of these progressive forces internationally. And in other words, the left, the pro-communist, the anti-American left, is really hailing what Francis is doing at the Vatican. So when we look at what the Roman Catholic Church under the control of Pope Francis is doing today, I noticed in your debate with Dugan, that was done back in 2011, it wasn't so clear what road, what way, what path the Roman Catholic Church would take. Do you believe Francis today has been captured by the Marxists, or is he just confused and going back and forth and doesn't truly understand the global power struggle he's in?
I believe he's confused. I believe he's not a very intelligent man. And he loves publicity. This is the problem. He's a vain man. It's obviously. He tries to pretend he's a very humble guy, but this is not true. He loves to be seen and applauded. He craves this. And this is the easy victim for these manipulators. But we have to take into consideration the fact that the infiltration of communists in the Catholic Church began in the 20s.
Yes.
We have now 90 years of infiltration. So in the 60s, in the Second Vatican Council, they were already very powerful. They control almost everything. And you know, the last Pope, Benedict XVI, he used to say, "My power stops at that door." He felt surrounded. He felt as a prisoner. I don't believe he renounced it by reasons of health.
Yeah.
I believe he said, well, I cannot do nothing. I'm a prisoner. If I cannot do anything, I'll not stay here. And you know, Malachi Martin, do you know Malachi Martin?
Yes.
He wrote a very good book in the time of John Paul II called The Keys of This Blood.
Yes.
And he said that the mission of the Catholic Church was to resist this globalist schemes. And John Paul II was very aware of what is happening. He understood the situation. He didn't know what to do, but he understood what happened. This man doesn't understand anything. I believe he's a superficial mind.
Well, that could be. Maybe the jury is still out as to his motivation or whether he does have a coherent, thought-out ideology or not. But clearly, when we talk about Barack Obama, at least in my view, we go back to 2008 when my group released documents on the role of a Communist Party operative named Frank Marshall Davis in mentoring Barack Obama as a teenager out in Hawaii. We know Obama has this ideology. He's been, you might say, brainwashed into it. He clearly accepts it. We have a president of the United States 6 years into his term who's been, as we can see in so many areas, fundamentally transforming the United States. As somebody, Olavo, who's been here for several years and who came out of Brazil, seeing the process underway there, what parallels are there between the United States and what happened in Brazil, and what can we do to resist or effectively counter it?
Well, in 2008, I had the impression that, well, this guy is a Brazilian politician. In Brazil, we are used to this level of dishonesty and mendacity and so on, and Americans are not. They cannot believe a guy can be so dishonest. And I said, well, they will need some time to get adapted to the situation, adapt their eyes to the situation and see what's going on. But if a guy can be elected president of the United States with false documents and with hiding most of his biography, and nobody can even ask him about it, well, and so the nation is defenseless against this kind of scheme.
Yes.
And this is the problem here. This guy is a level of malice, weakness that the Americans are not used to, but they have to get used fast. Otherwise, the same thing that happened in Brazil will happen here. Because in Brazil,
now people might say, "Oh, come on, you know, Brazil's still a democracy. You've still got elections down there in Brazil. We have elections up here. We can elect a Republican Congress. Obama's going out of office in 2 years. We can elect a Republican president. Everything's going to turn around."
Well, turn around, but during 8 years, he can do a lot of things, a lot of destruction.
Yeah.
And then you have a new president. This president will take 20 years to correct all the problems that Obama created. He did great harm to the United States. This was not free. This will cost lots of money and lots of time and lots of human effort. And all this could be avoided if in 2008, the first one who published something about Obama's documents was a lady called Debbie Schlussel. And everybody thought she was a little crazy. Yeah? And I say, well, she's crazy, but she's telling the truth. The document is really false. You can see with your own eyes. But nobody wanted to believe because this was too bad. This was looking even too stupid. He said nobody will try to dupe us with such a childish trick. Well, they did the childish trick and it worked. This is the fact.
Yes. Now, whether his documents are real or not, I think my argument would be we knew enough about him, even back in 2008, if the media had paid attention to our reports on his relationship with Frank Marshall Davis, his ties to the Democratic Socialists, the communist terrorists in Chicago. I mean, I can go down the list. We knew all that. We knew about his connections to pro-Arab terrorist groups, pro-PLO groups, and still we couldn't get the major media to pay attention, not even the conservative media for the most part.
Nobody wanted to believe it.
Yeah, nobody wanted to believe it.
This is too bad to be true. This should be, maybe is a right-wing conspiracy.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, this all sounds sounds almost pessimistic, though. Now, but in terms of what we can do here, explain to our viewers, as somebody who came out of Brazil, up here in the United States, we see stories about, well, Brazil just went through another election, and you had a very close election there on the presidential contest, and Dilma Rousseff.
It was not an election, because if the counting of the votes is secret, you cannot trust it. This is not a real, it's not a normal election. It's not a legitimate election. This is a fraud, a complete fraud. Mm-hmm. And the guy who was responsible for the counting of the votes as the president of the Electoral Commission, he had been a lawyer for the attorney for the Workers' Party. He worked for the Workers' Party for years. Mm-hmm. And was a protege of the Workers' Party, and he just returned the favors he received. So only 23 people follow the vote, the counting of the votes. This is so absurd. This is so obviously a fraud.
Let me give out some identification information here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with OLAVO de Carvalho, president of the Inter-American Institute. He's a prominent Brazilian writer and philosopher. His website is theinteramerican.org. We've been referring to his debate with Alexander Dugin, the Vladimir Putin advisor. This is a pre-publication copy of the book, but you can go to the website and read the debate for yourself. That website is http://debateolavodugan.blogspot.com. That's debateolavodugan.blogspot.com. Again, it's important. It's fascinating to read this debate and understand in concrete terms what Dugin is up to, and who are the global players in this unfolding drama, this global power struggle. Is there, Olavo, any way in your view at this late date that we can avoid what looks like is coming a world socialist regime or dictatorship of some kind?
Of course, we can always do something. We can always fight. But the problem is that you have to get your eyes used to the new situation. If people don't believe, there are people that are so wicked, more wicked than they can imagine, they will not fight them. This is the problem. It's a problem of vision. Get your vision, use it to a new level of dishonesty, an upgrade of dishonesty. And this is happening before our very eyes. And in Brazil, in the beginning, nobody wanted to believe me because they had the same reaction. Oh, this is too bad to be true.
Yeah.
It took more than 15 years in order people to begin to pay attention to what I was saying. Now, you know, during this meetings in the streets, thousands of people in the street, they show pancards, how do you say, cartazes? Cartazes, como se diz? They began an inscription, Olavo is right. Everybody, now everybody knows I was saying the truth, but it took more than 15 years. And here you have the same difficulty. You have to insist and insist and insist and never give up. Never, 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 never. It's not a matter of ideology. It's not a matter that we are the right and they are the left. We are telling the truth. We are telling the facts, and they are lying. This is the main point.
How much resistance is there in Brazil?
Now, you know, today there was news from the government itself. You know what the support for Dilma now? 7%. 7%. So 93% of the Brazilians are against Dilma Rousseff.
And yet she just won that election, according to the official count. Didn't she get about 52% of the vote?
She won no election at all. Okay. How can you say that? How can we accept a secret counting of votes?
Totally fraudulent.
Totally fraudulent.
Yeah.
We can never accept this. An election has to have transparency. Everybody has to have access to the counting of the votes and verify it, and then we accept, well, you won. We count the votes and you won. That's okay. But we cannot count the votes. We cannot even see the votes. And the machines are programmed not to be audited. They cannot be audited. So it's useless to count the votes now, because only the votes that are registered in the machines, only final results are there.
These are the Smartmatic machines?
Smartmatic machines, yeah, that.
And by the way, on that point, let me mention before I go to my co-host Jerry Kenney for some questions. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to our website, usasurvival.org, you'll see we have a story up there about this upcoming event called the Washington Conclave for Democracy. It's in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club on March 21st. It'll be from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. That's a Saturday, March 21st, at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And this coalition is designed to shed light on a lot of what we've been talking about today, what's been happening throughout Latin America. But in particular, there's going to be a speaker who's going to focus on the use of these so-called Smartmatic machines to manipulate or rig vote counts in places like Brazil and Venezuela. Olavo is going to be one of the speakers at this event. I'm going to be there myself. And so we encourage you to, if you're in the Washington area, want to come. I've talked to the organizer, and we have his contact information there. He says it's open to the press and the public, and this will be a very important opportunity to hear from speakers from around Latin America about the stakes and how this ultimately will affect the United States. Jerry?
Yes, Olavo, with country after country going communist in Latin America, how much longer until Mexico becomes Marxist? Or are they holding Mexico back because that might just be a little too obvious to Americans?
Well, I'm not very well acquainted with this internal situation of Mexico, but I believe that everything is so easy for these people now because there was no resistance. You know, in Brazil, resistance began yesterday, less than 1 year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And during many years, nobody wants to believe and nobody wanted to fight. This Lenin used it to say the best way to win is to take from your enemy the will to fight. And nobody had will to fight. And suddenly it exploded everywhere. Huh? And now 93% of the Brazilians are against these people. I believe the same thing can happen everywhere. But the problem is most people, they don't want to see how serious the situation is. Because these people, they have been proceeding bit by bit, very, very slowly, very discreetly. Lula himself confessed it. There is his speech was published in the very official page of the Brazilian presidency in 2005, telling everything they were doing, the São Paulo Forum, and even so, people didn't want to believe. You know, in 2000, quando foi a eleição que foi a primeira eleição do Lula? 2002. Most military voted for Lula. Because they believe, no, he's not a communist, he's a good guy, he's a Christian reformer and so on. The same type of things they said about Mao Zedong in the 40s. Yeah. And now they know what's really happening. The human mind has this tendency not to believe bad news. They don't want to know. Only people who are professionally involved in such studies can follow, can accept certain kind of facts that the normal common citizen cannot accept. But bit by bit they will accept, and they will know what's going on, and they will fight.
What do you think about that, Jerry?
You know, I think that, you know, when we talk about Mexico in particular, as I was saying, maybe part of the situation in Mexico is different because Mexico has a little bit of a safety valve, and that is that if people are unhappy in Mexico, regardless of what happens, they just migrate to the United States if they can. But I mean, the frightening thing is that it certainly appears as though we have a Marxist in our own White House. So I don't even know if Mexico going Marxist would be enough to frighten Americans into waking up.
Yeah, Mexico does not need to become Marxist because the United States are becoming Marxist.
It's a sad thing to say, and like you, Olavo, I was very hopeful that the Roman Catholic Church would lead the resistance to these various schemes.
This is the church mission, huh?
Yeah. It's tragic to see what's happening with the Pope making statements against capitalism, embracing all this so-called climate change rhetoric about how capitalism is destroying Mother Earth. At this World Conference of Popular Movements at the Vatican last October that I write about in my column today, the Pope met with what Armando Valladares calls Marxist revolutionaries. They were there in the Vatican with the Pope. The Pope met with them. He highlighted their, quote, struggle. He met with Evo Morales, the Marxist president of Bolivia, who, when he was reelected last year, gave credit to Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez. But let me ask you this. When we look at the fact that Marxism doesn't work economically, and we see what's happening in Brazil, but even equally significant in Venezuela, where the economy is just deteriorating by the day, is the corruption of the communists enough to wake a lot of people up?
I believe this is another problem with the American vision of these things. Because economic failure can topple a government in a democracy, but not in a dictatorship. A dictatorship gets stronger when it fails economically. Because if the people have nothing to eat, they have no money, they cannot organize themselves and react. They're weakened. So for a dictator, economic failure is good. But in a democracy, of course, if let's say the price of the gas goes very high, people get revolted. But if you have a dictatorial system that dominates the country, misery, poverty is good for them.
So no matter how many economic failures they have, no matter how much corruption, it's not going to threaten their rule.
Economic failure can be a political gain. But corruption is another thing. Because when people hear about corruption, they feel they were robbed, and they get revolted. But so poverty is one thing, economic failure is one thing, and corruption is another thing. It's corruption that is destroying the Worker Party's system in Brazil. Because people are really angry with this.
But as long as the Workers' Party runs the electoral process and can count the votes, they'll never give up power.
I believe they'll never give up. They have to be toppled by a direct popular intervention. I don't believe very much in a military intervention, but I believe in popular intervention. They have to expel these people from political life forever.
Now, what do we do, though, in the meantime about Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine? The United States under Obama refuses to even provide weapons to the Ukrainians to defend themselves.
As long as Obama is in the president, you can do nothing. The United States are lost. This guy, the other day, he said that Venezuela is a threat to the United States. It's not. Venezuela is a threat to Brazil. What's a threat to the United States is Russia and China and the Muslim world. But he cannot say this. So see, he blames Venezuela, a little country. This is of course, is disinformation. Venezuela is no problem for the United States, but Russia and China are. And because Russia and China are acting by means of Venezuela. Venezuela is an instrument for these people. Venezuela is not the active agent of the situation. It's an instrument only. But Obama will never say this because he is trying to collaborate with Russia and China and with Iran and so on. He's obviously against the United States. It's one needs to be blind not to see this.
Yes. Well, it's an extraordinary situation we have with a Marxist in the White House in the United States. The failure by so many in our political system and our media, including on the conservative side, to recognize what's happening. I agree with you totally. There's still people who just can't bring themselves to admit we have a Marxist in the White House and to react accordingly, to call him that, to say it like it is. That's why I like you so much and your work. You're not only on target, but through your writings, this debate with Dugin, you offer a coherent philosophy of countering this dangerous alliance against the United States, against Israel and our allies. You understand the basics of what it's going to take to save Western or Christian civilization. It's the same thing that Armando Valladares, who served 22 years in prison in Castro's Cuba, said in his column that I quote today. He talks about how he's so disappointed in the Pope who made this deal with Obama and Castro to recognize Cuba. He says this threatens the entire future of Latin America. He puts it the Christian future of the Americas. And isn't it true, I certainly get this from your writings, Olavo, and your debate with Dugin, that in order to save us, to save our country, to save our way of life, it's going to have to take a grounding in a religious approach that we have to talk to us about that, the necessity of a Christian worldview or a Judeo-Christian worldview.
All civilizations in the world were based on religion. The story of lay civilization, this is stupidity. There's no lay civilization. Lay civilization is just an interface between Christian America and Muslim America or Communist America. It's only an interface. So this illusion of lay democracy, this is an illusion. Democracy only works if the people is Christian. Your founding fathers knew this. They said this many times. This is a constitution for a Christian people, period.
Yes.
I don't say that the state has to be Christian. No, there's no need for this. The state has not to meddle, to put his nose into these matters. This is correct, as Jefferson used to say. But the people, the population has to be Christian. They have to have values. They have to have moral law. And so they can direct their own lives without the government interference.
Yes.
But if you start with this thing like sex lib and gay rights, etc., well, all this is an illusion. You know, there is a book recently published by, I'll show you. This guy, David Richards, is a gay ideologue in Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote this book, The Rise of Gay Rights and the Fall of the British Empire. And he said, we, the gays, we toppled the British Empire. And he's right. Because, you know, in every nation, you have a kind of an elite, an aristocracy or oligarchy. This is a fatality. This is everywhere. The problem is when the oligarchy goes against the country instead of defending it.
Yeah.
How do you do this? You persuade them to get egoist, to think of their financial interests and sexual desires before, and to postpone the interests of the nation. Huh? If a guy is very interested in sex pleasure, he'll not be very generous. Huh? Sex pleasure is egoist by nature. And so the more a guy gets obsessed with sexual pleasure, the more he decays. This is not a problem of being heterosexual, homosexual. No? In Brazil, there is a guy who is proposing heterosexual pride. This is stupidity. Heterosexual, homosexual is sexual. And any politics based in sexual desire is crazy and destructive. Anyone. And, you know, Stalin knew it. This is the reason Stalin didn't accept these people for the Frankfurt School in the Soviet Union. He said, you'll go to preach these doctors in Germany, in the United States, not here.
and it's gotten so bad.
Marxism.
Gotten so bad that, as I wrote about in a recent column, we've got this person, this former Army analyst, Bradley Manning, in Leavenworth, in prison in the United States. He's the one serving 30, 35 years for espionage for giving classified information to WikiLeaks. This guy, he's obviously a troubled young man, is now in the process of going from Bradley Manning to Chelsea Manning, becoming a transgendered. And we're at this point in the United States, you probably read this, Olavo, that the U.S. Army, our Army, is providing at taxpayer expense hormone treatments so he can become a woman. I mean, this is the kind of thing that's happened. And I appreciate your point so much that in order to reassert or to recapture our culture, we have to be morally upstanding, upright people. And they are literally rotting us out from within.
Yeah, they are duping us. Groucho Marx used to say, will you believe me or your own eyes? And these people are doing this with us because they dress a man as a woman, and we have to accept she's a woman. But I'm seeing she's not. I cannot believe my eyes. I have to believe the government. This is absurd. This is an attack to human intelligence, an attack to human consciousness. This is a crisis of anthropological dimensions. Huh?
It is. I mean, the idea that two men can get married?
No, two men. 3 men. In Thailand the other day, there was a marriage of 3 men. And what, not 4 or 5 or 25 or 150, eh? A lot of men, all naked, doing group sex. This is now a family.
Oh.
They want us to accept this, and seriously, we cannot laugh. Huh? If you laugh, you are homophobic.
Ah!
They're forbidding us to see with our own eyes.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we're being taught to disregard what we see, what we know to be true, what we know to be based on morality and tradition. We're being taught, ignore all that and just accept it, go along with it. As we slide, I think it was the famous judge who didn't make it to the Supreme Court, Robert Bork, put it in his book, Sliding Towards Gomorrah. We're sliding into the abyss. And yet, so many of us are afraid to say, stop, we can't do this. We've got to save ourselves. We've got to save our country and our civilization, everything.
We have to save our brain.
Everything is on the line. Jerry, what do you think?
Well, I think that people really need to understand what cultural Marxism is. You know, it's there is a reason that they're trying to degrade, our culture for political purposes. As you said, that's what it's all about. And there was a quote expert that was on the radio the other day, a psychologist, psychiatrist, I don't know what she was, but she was trying to explain to the audience here locally how prostitution should be legalized. And at that time, I'd had just about enough. And I called her and I said, you experts are the ones that are probably responsible for sending more people down the road to destruction. And I think that's what Americans have to look at. We have to look at our institutions, our universities, these quote unquote experts that tell everybody if it feels good, do it, and take a look at the impact that it's having on our nation. But when you destroy the culture, you destroy the nation.
Of course.
Well, and I think Olavo is so on target in so many ways that not only do we have to recognize the truth of what we see and recognize the depravity and the slide towards Sodom and Gomorrah right in front of our eyes, but understand, as he so eloquently puts it in his writings and on his website, that this is part of a long-term process of based on the communist movement that is now racing, competing with these other global power centers for ultimate control of the world. Olavo, you've given us a lot of time tonight, and I want to thank you for that. Our guest has been Olavo de Carvalho, president of the Inter-American Institute. We've given out your website, theinteramerican.org. I've mentioned the upcoming conference in D.C., Conclave for Democracy, March 21st at the National Press Club. Is there anything else, Olavo, you'd like to add in conclusion?
No, I'm very happy to talk with you again. It was a great honor for me. I love your work. I'm always reading your articles, and I love them. And I know that America needs more guys like you.
Well, we thank you for that. We're trying our best, Jerry and I, to get this Roku TV, internet streaming TV, that we're doing now. We're also going to post this show on YouTube, but we do it on Roku. And because of Jerry's efforts, we started this show almost 2 years ago, and we're in, at last count, over 70 countries around the world. We've gotten to some of our videos a great response from countries like Brazil, who say, hey, what's happening in America has happened to us. So we hope to bring people together through this new medium, if you will, and exposing people to your writings. Again, theinteramerican.org is your website. I hope to see you on the 21st in D.C. Olavo, thanks a million for spending this time with us.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Jerry Kenney. God bless you.
Thank you. Jerry?
And that's our show for tonight. Don't forget to log on to our website, which is usasurvival.org. Those of you who are new to the program, Cliff has some real stem winders of articles. And we appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back again next Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern here on America's Survival TV on Roku. Thanks for watching.